Carl, if you want to start recording. Town of North Smithfield Halliwell Review Committee, Thursday, May 20th, 2021. Our meeting is kicking off at 6:35. First on our agenda is roll call. Mr. Halliwell. Here. Mr. Nigerian. Here. Mr. Mayo. Here. Mr. Bradford. Here. Mr. Corvo. Here. Mr. Savini. Here. Mr. Simpkins. Here. And the chair is here, and Mr. Burton is going to be absent from this evening's meeting. Next on the agenda is the review and approval of draft meeting minutes from May 6, 2021. Sorry, we got those off to you a little later than expected, but if you guys want to take a minute to take review, any corrections or comments? Otherwise, I'll be looking for a motion to approve in a second. Motion to approve from Mr. Halliwell. Do we have a second? Second. Second from Mr. Mayo. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay. Meeting minutes are approved. Okay, next on the agenda is for discussion, the Halliwell insurance update and the trust recommendations. When I was informed, I forwarded the email that Mr. Corvo, Mr. Zielinski had shared with me. I just want to run down the list so that everybody's clear on what the trust has recommended that we do. So for the interior, they made mention of prior to any occupancy, a complete evaluation of the HVAC system to include filter replacement, ductwork cleaning, mechanical evaluation, and any other evaluation deemed necessary by a licensed and insured HVAC contractor. Number two, consultation and evaluation of the small animal intrusion issue with a licensed and insured pest control contractor. Number three, general housekeeping, including cleaning of floors and disposal of waste and debris. Number four, conduct an indoor air quality test after the HVAC system evaluation. The trust has a program that will cover half of the cost of an approved IAQ test at member building locations. And number five, an evaluation of the electrical wiring in the building. Rodents tend to chew on wiring, which could result in electrical fire. So some of the items that are listed in there are actually going to be covered by Weston & Samson. So I have spoken with Mr. Zielinski in regards to that. So in talking with Carolyn Wells from Weston & Samson, we will put a sense of urgency for building 10. So then that way, folks, we can use that evaluation. And if there's anything that needs to be updated, we can start to formulate an RFP or an RFQ that needs to go out so that we can get the recommended work done. So that those buildings can be completed, or that work can be completed.
Jeff, can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Air quality, I'm assuming that's one of them that's eligible under the Weston & Sampson contract?
I would think that I would have to talk to Caroline about that.
Okay.
It could easily be an ad service if it's not specifically in there already. I think right now what we own is the evaluation of the system, and then they'll make their recommendations. Whether or not they'll start it up to see what's working and what's not, I'm going to leave it to them, and then they can go from there. And then as far as the other three items, these were on the exterior. One was replace all damaged trim boards to reduce the potential of animal intrusion. Repairing trim boards is only going to be a temporary fix. Number two is paint the exterior of the building. Painted surfaces are less susceptible to small animals gnawing on wood surfaces than unpainted or faded painted surfaces. And then number three, cut back the trees from the building and roof surfaces in order to extend the life expectancy of the wood siding and roof shingles. And again, in talking with Mr. Zielinski, we were thinking that the DPW could be able to handle those tasks and get those completed. So then that way we can be one step closer to using building 10. So unless anybody has any other questions, it was just more for an update, so everybody knows what's going on, what our thinking is, so we can, like I said, get some folks into building 10 when we kind of check all these boxes.
Right, just one question again, I don't know how it's going, how Weston and Sampson is going to view, because I know the priority is building 10. I would just want to make sure that, you know, the way the contract is handled, that because we're having to focus on building 10 and doing, you know, certain items that fall under the you know, what this is requiring, and as far as the trust paying half and saying that Weston and Sampson will pick that up based on the contract. I think we just have to be aware and make sure that, you know, if they do, let's say, an air quality test on building 10 alone, and then we find out, you know, 3-4 months later that we also wanted to do an air quality test on another set of buildings, that it's not considered a change order.
Mr. Chairman, what is the, just a little bit, I guess I wanted some clarification. What expenditures are deemed appropriate within a budget, and what's the objective for a building 10? I mean, are we kind of going on a tangent to get the building to a point where then we have to deal with use issues? Because again, this gets back to the base question that was discussed a little bit at some of the previous meetings as to the existing facility. You know, it's a delicate balance between, yes, people look at it and say, we have buildings there, maybe we can use them. And then this committee is charged with looking at the future. So it's a balance between the future and the current. I mean, I just know how much money can be spent on these evaluations and cleaning. I mean, I'm assuming that what you're asking for is a quotation from an HVAC subcontractor to perform this scope of work, and then we would then approve that, or how are you interpreting this? This doesn't, because what I may have missed is in this summary, is this a statement of conditions? It only says once, prior to occupancy. The rest of the bullet items do not say prior to occupancy. But was it interpreted that everything that is listed here shall be done?
That's how I've interpreted it, but I can ask Ray for some clarification.
But shall be done by whom?
So the evaluation is going to be handled by Weston and Sampson, and based on what they're going to provide to us is their assessment. So the assessment will essentially give us an idea of what the scope of work would be required to be done by a mechanical contractor. Once we have that scope of work, or we would then be making a recommendation to the town council that we should proceed with an RFP or an RFQ process to get this work done.
But is that, unless I'm misunderstanding, is that not taking Weston and Sampson away from their core task, which was to do a complete review of all structures, as opposed to now immediately focusing on building 10?
No, I don't believe, I think in talking with Weston and Sampson, we would say the urgency is to get an assessment of building 10, but you're not excluding the other 9 buildings. Do 10 first, and then come back to us, whether it be with a draft or a formal presentation to this committee so we understand, and then go back and finish the rest of the property.
I guess my greatest concern is that, that's great, that's wonderful. And so say we're 3 months or 2 months have passed by and they give us their report. Then we come to the realization that, I'll just pick a number, $20,000 is needed in real money, not town labor. That is great if we can expend it and it's within the budget. But $20,000 is needed to put the building in a preliminary state of occupancy and use. But that 20,000 may be completely misspent if building 10 ends up not being in the grand plan. So all I'm suggesting is that we should be conscious of the fact that if we're truly approaching this with a clean slate, no preconditions, assess, analyze, recommend, do we want to accept that burden of saying, well, no matter what, if we do this fine, no matter what, we're going to expend X to get building 10 to a point where town organizations can use it while we are meandering through our greater tax. I just don't want it to be because then it begs the question, well, you know, you spent 20, why don't you just figure out a way to make this fit into everything else so that we don't waste the 20? And you can't fault somebody who uses that mentality and logic because it's well suited. It's their money. It's our money. So that's all. I just don't want us to, because I'm almost of the mindset to say, you know what? Unless there's a compelling reason for town bodies to use the buildings, just leave them be until we get everything and we can approach it the way we really should, which is the deck is clear, the table is flat. There is no preconception as to what we should or should not do. That's all. And I meandered a bit, but that was my point.
Probably make that decision once we get that report. I don't know what the number is.
Well, we could get the bid no matter what.
Yeah.
And then say, oh, okay, all right, yeah, well, if it's less than 10, why would we do it? But I just didn't, I wanted to put that out there that we shouldn't just do it.
Yeah.
We should be conscious of the fact that we don't want to be tying our hands.
Yeah. So I'm kind of working optimistically, best case scenario that building 10 can be used. So I think that's kind of where my mind is, and not used from now until whatever the new stuff is, but just as a temporary use, not a permanent use. And one of the things that and you bring up another good point with the funding. So one of the things that I would like to ask our finance director and town administrator about is that when we voted to decommission Halliwell, there was $300,000 put aside for that decommissioning. That was what was voted on. That was in the verbiage. So I'd like to know what is going on, where that 300,000 is, if it's sitting, if we can have recommendational power to make our recommendations to town council and say, no, for example, building 10, we feel that it's worthwhile to spend the $10,000 to upgrade the mechanical system so it can be used temporarily in the immediate future. If it comes back and it's a $300,000 fix, then we might be a little bit more hesitant about that. But that's one clarification that I would like to, that I haven't, it's been on my mind, but I just haven't had an opportunity to sit with the finance director about it.
Do you want a motion to that effect, or you just want to handle it internally?
I was going to ask the question, and then I was going to come back and report to everybody on that.
Okay, no, I think it's a great idea.
So, and just a little off topic with our updates, I'm thinking that in the future meetings, we might have a chairman update. So then that way I can at least, with the emails that I've sent you guys in regards to the insurance and the trust and the conversations that I've had with some other folks, I had a conversation with Cheryl Marandola. I'll get to that on our next topic. But I have a few balls juggling in the air, so I want to just keep everybody apprised of that too. So I think next meeting, you'll probably be seeing that be a more frequent thing.
So I would just say, you know, we're kind of making decisions in this black box, right? There are greater concerns, and ultimately our goal is to make recommendations to the town council, not to actually, you know, it's not like we have money to spend. We ask and say that we think it would be a good idea to do this. Without that larger context of kind of knowing what we're working with, it's a little bit difficult to know might be. So if, for instance, there is money that, you know, is sitting around from the decommissioning that has gone unused, that might influence how we think about, you know, what should be done. Should that be used towards temporary, you know, repairs to the building so that it can be used, or should we, you know, be thinking that that should go towards something longer term? So it'd be good to just know where we stand, what we have to work with, so that we can think about this later.
Okay. Does anybody else have any further comment or discussion on the insurance update, trust recommendations?
The only question I've got, are we still not allowed to even go into look at the buildings at this point?
At this point, I know the community garden is getting set on the exterior, so I would say that you're free to walk about the property, but just not going into them yet.
So I did a homework question. So at the beginning of the note from the trust, it says the following recommendations. It doesn't say the following requirements. And I'm wondering if there's a distinction that we should be making here. Are these things that have to be done before the building can be insured, or are these things that they feel should be done, but in the meantime, it could be in use? Or is there some mix of those two things in that list? It's not totally clear for me. Some of those feel like must do, some of them feel like should do's.
I can certainly reach back out to Ray and get an update on if he's getting it. I would assume at this point that he would get an official document saying that these are the things that you need to do, as opposed to just an email. But let me reach back out to him and I'll clarify.
Do you get any sense of a timetable for some of, particularly the interior stuff, as far as when it would happen? I know this group's anxious to get in. I wasn't sure if now some things, if they're covered by Weston Sampson, or then if they have to go out to bid, that's an additional 3-4 week bid process.
It's tough to say without an actual assessment of this mechanical system itself. If it's replace this one duct work and replace the filter, then that should be a fairly easy thing that probably, if the bidding laws are similar in Rhode Island as they are in Massachusetts, it would be a low enough cap that we could just go out and solicit some bids, get it done. If it's a little bit more extraneous, then we certainly would likely have to go out to bid for it.
But what about the initial review? Like somebody has to go in and review the HVAC system, or has to run an air quality test, and we have them, and you may not have an answer. Do we have an idea of a time frame of when those initial reviews may happen?
I believe Weston and Samson is going to be doing that assessment the first 3 weeks of June. So somebody will be going in there, they'll be assessing the condition of everything, and they'll be reporting back.
And all this work is in lieu of us giving the insurance, right? We can't have insurance, this stuff is complete.
Well, that's one of the things that I'm gonna follow up, as Chris has brought to our attention, that it says recommendations and not requirements. So we need to have that clarification. Okay. If everybody's good, then we'll move on to item number 4. So we have for discussion, consideration, and action, identifying stakeholders and outreach process. So there's two parts to this agenda item. This is kind of our getting started to talk with the community part. And what I've done and what I've heard from this committee is that we need to have a starting point So what I've done is I've looked at all the boards and commissions that we have in town. There are a total of 19 various boards and commissions. And what I would like to do tonight is kind of just run through them. I don't want to exclude any group. But I would also like to kind of assign, there are 9 of us, so I think if we can all take 2, we can reach out to these boards and commissions, have a conversation with them. And then we're also gonna start putting together a list of questions that we as a committee feel that we need to ask these groups. And as we ask these questions, we can start to get an idea of what some of these other boards are thinking, where they're coming from, where they see this property going, and that can really start to be our starting point. I'm being redundant now. So, and then I was also gonna suggest that you get friendly with your neighbors, start talking with your neighbors, ask them these same questions, start to dig in a little bit, understand, even if you just talk with 1 or 2 neighbors around that are on your street, get an understanding of where they're coming from, what their expectations are, how they expect to see this property evolve into what it could be. We all have our 9 different opinions of what this might be. So now we need to start hearing what other people are thinking and what they'd like to see. Because it's not going to be a place for just the 9 of us to hang out. We got gators down the street for us to hang out. Or Lucky Dog or Village Haven or Coffee and Cream if we're a breakfast group. But Beef Barn, you know, the possibilities around here are endless. So, so honestly, I just want to, I think what we can start with is running down the boards and commissions. I know Mr. Nigerian, who's the chairman of the zoning board. I'm on the planning board. Steve's on town council. So we can maybe cross those off and say we have those covered. But then if there are other boards that you don't want to jump towards or gravitating towards, interested in speaking with those members, I think that would be really helpful. So, and then not that I want to put any group out. If we felt like, for example, I'm sorry to Mr. Byron, Mr. Connolly, and Mr. Lapierre, if the board of canvassers might be appropriate to talk to or not. We can still talk with them, but again, just kind of narrowing some focus and talking. But I'm probably just shooting myself in the foot, so I'm just going to be quiet now and run down the list. So, anybody that would like to speak with the Assessors Board of Review? That's going to make this tough on me. So here, let me run down the boards and commissions that we have. So we have the Assessors Board of Review, the Asset Management Commission, and before I go any further, does everybody understand what each group is somewhat tasked with? The Asset Management Commission, they're responsible for all of the oversight of all the town buildings. Tom, am I getting that right?
Yes, you are.
Okay. We also have the Board of Canvassers, the Budget Committee, Conservation Commission, the Economic Development Commission. We have the Historic District Commission, the Juvenile Hearing Board, Municipal Building Review Task Force, the Parks and Recreation Commission, the Personnel Board, Planning Board, Public Art Advisory Committee, Public Safety Commission, Senior Citizen Advisory Committee, Sewer Commission, Town Council, School Committee, and Zoning Board.
Question for you. Boards published, posted on the town website, contact info for every member.
Yeah.
You think we should maybe just focus on crafting basically a questionnaire, right? And sending it, one of us could send it out to everybody, so everybody gets the same questions in the same format and the same context.
Yeah, I think that's the intent of the part 2 of this, but I would like to have one of us as a representative at their meeting so that we can hear what they are saying rather than just a typed response. I want there to be a dialogue between these boards and commissions and a member of this board. So then that way, it's not just a, hey, we got these questions, can you answer them? Because some of them might just be one-worded answers, but I think the intent of what we want to do with these discussions is have more than one-word answers. If we're going to the senior citizens board and they say, well, we want a place to have meetings and everything. Okay, so we'll take it one step further. What other activities do you envision? They'll say, well, we need a space. Okay, what's going to happen in this space? Are you going to be doing cooking classes? Are you going to be doing dancing classes, bingo, bridge? What kind of activities are you going to be doing? So it's just that the answers lead to more questions, and to really, what I'm hoping that we can all do is really pull information out from folks rather than just having, one-worded answers back on an email.
I think though, we might want to think it through a moment, just that some of the boards are far more relevant to the question at hand than others. I mean, all due respect to, the board of the set canvassers, or even the zoning board, for example, that I chair. The zoning board does not have the legal capacity to make, nor should they, any recommendation, because implicit in the recommendation may be that they are going to vote in favor if there's a zoning question, and that's inappropriate. Is the opinion of zoning members relevant? It's just as relevant as planning board members and every other committee that we have. Maybe we should focus and look at the ones that have a vested kind of interest, elderly, youth, juvenile, the things where their people, parking recs, even the infrastructure people, the building and grounds people, they're all relevant because they're interacting at one level or another with virtually anything this committee would end up coming up with. Planning board members are very in tune with the town already. They may have personal opinions, but I don't know that it's appropriate for the planning board without a submission to come out and say, we are in agreement with X, Y, and Z, because you're prejudicing the process. But individual members have the right to their own opinion. So that's why maybe we should whittle that list down. We don't have to be, every committee does it. I mean, we could always send something to a chair, and a chair could then give to the committee members that on your own, if you'd like, you can participate, but this committee will not offer an opinion. So maybe we should just focus on the ones that are most specific and will give us the greatest return.
Well, I'm thinking like how Frank was thinking about, they're still citizens of the town, right? So we could just send them emails, how is that affecting their boards? Yeah, so we're still reaching those.
Well, they would be responding as a, but what I mentioned is that in that light, the chair of whatever committee we're talking about could say, okay, we received this, you individually as a member, you can give your opinion, but the board, this committee will not offer a specific conclusion.
Sure.
So that's the way of bridging that gap, where we can still engage every committee, I guess, and say, we're doing this.
I'm thinking about it in a different way, engaging with them individually. If all their email addresses are online, then we're just talking to each person, that's more of a bigger.
Yeah, that's what I was asking, I think it's.
You know what I mean? So it's not specific to their board, it's to that person, but the one board, so they have knowledge that they're still responding as a citizen, not as a board.
I wonder if every member of every board is on the website. That's a good question.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, the scope and lens of how we're asking questions, more so from a resident standpoint versus from a board member standpoint.
So I would agree with that, and that, you know, some of these, they're gonna have more relevance to what's going on at the Halliwell site than not. But I would also say that there might be other municipal services that have even greater interest that we should be talking to, like police and fire. The library might have a strong opinion on what happens there. I don't know, the school department, we talked about, you know, after school sports, using it, cross country, stuff like that. So, you know, in some ways we can contract that list, but we also might want to think, are there other groups to include in that? And, you know, obviously there are huge segments of the community that are not associated with, you know, municipal services or government in any way that we want to consider. But as a starting point, I think, you know, this approach is pretty good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, one of them that I was thinking that, you know, it's kind of unique because they really, this commission has been limited on really what they've done over the last several years, but I think that the Economic Development Committee would be important to be involved, because the utilization of a community center is two parts. One, for the community itself that it represents, the residents, but also, you know, any events that are taking place where it's driving people to the town, you know, the Economic Development Committee, that would be a plus for them, because they're gonna wanna be in a position to, you know, to make sure that economically it's beneficial for our local businesses. So I think that would be important as well.
Jeff, I'm just thinking, I think, and Frank briefly alluded to it, how about if we came up with a questionnaire, that kind of an overview of what our plan is, and the questionnaire, like, is there anything in our plan that you'd like to comment on? But let's give them something to sit around their meeting and say, okay, that's how let's think about this, and then we can say, if you like, a member of the committee would be more than happy to sit with you to discuss your specific ideas, as opposed to just showing up. I think they should have an idea of what we're doing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that process as well.
Everybody is.
Yeah. So then, why don't we start this way? We'll figure out what we'll kind of take an approach that meshes everybody's thoughts together. So it sounds like, why don't we first start by identifying some of the boards and commissions that might have a more vested interest in this process, and start with that. So Steve already threw out the Economic Development Commission.
I'm sure that Conservation Commission might be interested in there. Water behind, make some value there.
If you want to read the list again, and then we can, each one,
So we have the Assessors Board of Review.
I wouldn't think that that's relevant.
Okay. We have the Asset Management Commission.
Same with that.
I don't know.
Because
eventually that is an asset.
Yeah, it's going to become their responsibility eventually.
How do they differ from the capital grounds? I was curious. How does asset differ from capital grounds?
Capital.
Or I may not say it correctly. I just didn't know the difference.
Municipal Building Review.
Yeah,
So Municipal Building Review is solely responsible for this building and the police department, police station.
So the asset management is the entire.
Asset management, everything.
Yeah, I agree.
So yes to the Asset Management Commission, we're in agreement. The Board of Canvassers,
It doesn't really be relevant.
Budget Committee.
Well, that certainly plays in, because any asset we create is going to affect every budget.
Are we getting a resounding nod?
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll go beyond that.
Okay. Chris also signified the Conservation Commission, the Economic Development Commission, our committee, the Historic District Commission.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. I mean, they're playing a important role, whether it's applicable or not to the property.
Juvenile Hearing Board. Yeah, one of my thoughts with that is we asked the question, what are they getting into trouble for and how can we help get them out of trouble? The Municipal Building Review Task Force. I would say no.
They only charge
Yeah.
two.
Would that eventually fall under?
No, because I think once they make the decision on what they're gonna do with the police department, whatever process the police department goes through, it's a lifetime, appointment. But when this building is now considered, I'm considering this complete, so that's.
Also review.
So it's they're responsible for this building, and then they'll be responsible for the police station and whatever happens with that.
So essentially, we're going to do that for Halliwell.
Yeah, that's a decent way to put it. I think they have a little bit more power than we do, though. They get to play with money, I think. Parks and Rec Commission. I think that one's gonna be. I have been in conversations with the chairwoman, Cheryl Marandola. They are having a kickoff party for the garden tomorrow night. So anybody who's interested in going down to see what they're up to. And I know, I'm just gonna circle back on a topic that we talked about, roles and responsibilities. This is a little off topic, so forgive me. She and I were having a conversation about the Parks and Rec. It's official title. Kate Pascarello, the Parks and Rec coordinator, who also takes care of Scouters Hall, as we discussed. I asked Cheryl what her capacity is, if she can handle, if in fact Building 10 does come online, if she can handle that capacity. So that conversation being had, but for the chairman's update next meeting. Personnel Board. Planning Board. Sorry, Tom. Public Art Advisory Committee. I thought this was an interesting one because I was going to say, perhaps for the immediate use, they might have an artist that could put in like a temporary art installation. So then that way we can still get, the more activity that we can get down there, I think the better. And by having some sort of outside art installation could be a potential good way to bring people down there and get people to talk with them. Public Safety Commission.
I mean, it would be impactful for them.
Obviously, Senior Citizen Advisory Committee. Sewer Commission.
I mean, that's infrastructure.
There is a sewer connection down there.
I mean, that's capacity of the sewer lines, capacity of the sewer line.
Yep.
It's not, yeah, I don't know that it's.
Okay. Town Council.
Yes.
Okay. I know you guys got a lot on your plate, so I don't want to. And then we have Zoning Board.
I mean, like I said, the zoning board can't offer an opinion. Of course, we can take off the record with members,
Okay.
that's the extent of that.
Okay. And then we also have School Committee.
I think police and fire should be out of school. And school, yeah.
Okay.
Should we just kind of maybe send if you modify the list, maybe if you just send it to all of us and we can pick and choose and then you can sort it through and say, well, we got 4 people that want the same thing, and
Sure.
you can then say, well, what if you take this one and you take that one?
Or honestly, if you want to tag team some boards and commissions, that, I think that's fine too. I think that the more ears that we have at some of these meetings will probably be beneficial. Because I know sometimes in meetings that I take part in, I hear one thing, my boss hears a completely different thing. So, and that way there can be some consensus building amongst everybody as well. We can think of it as a team building exercise.
But I also think as part of what you're suggesting is that the roadmap, so that we have that consistency that you mentioned, needs to be that base level talking point survey, 5, 6 bullet points that maybe one of us can draft it and circulate it among us, and then we can give it some thought and say, well, I like this, what if we add that? The concept of just the whole basic, public use, private use, then within public use, the potential right off the top of your head, conceptual ideas that you've already heard, just so you've got some talking points to focus the people on, because I don't want them
I
necessarily.
think you're jumping ahead of me. So because the second part of this was that we have a discussion amongst ourselves and come to an agreement on some of the questions that we do ask. I don't want to be dictating the questions that I have my list of questions that I think we should be asking, but I wanted this to be, again, a collaborative effort so that everybody's, because there are clearly things that I think of, but obviously everybody else thinks, thankfully, differently than I do, because that would be very dangerous.
One other point I should make, though, what we don't want to do, we're very nicely trying to get in touch with townspeople who are giving of themselves by serving on a committee. But we don't want to, by doing that, give the vast majority of the people who are not directly involved a sense that, well, your opinion isn't as important. I'm not saying that's what we're doing, but we don't want the impression that that's what we're doing, that, oh, you're deferring to these people because they're all on committees and you must know each other, so therefore you're only listening to them. So, but it's a two-pronged approach. I agree wholeheartedly that we should go to these people because they're already active, but simultaneously, this idea of having a broader-based survey, either a mass mailing to every physical residence in the town, with the same basic thing where maybe they can just go to a website, if we had a portal where they could log on and say yes, no, maybe, we get all these surveys in our emails, almost daily, from different companies. Because I don't think we want to alienate people by trying to do something good. So maybe it should be a two-pronged.
Maybe back to like the friend was saying, individual board members emailing on this stuff. So if they want to participate, they can. It's not us picking who we choose to solicit. Does that make sense? So I think that we're being selective by doing this, in this list, when we could be more inclusive, give the option to respond.
Okay, yeah.
So I was gonna say, I think that's an important point. I think that everybody should know that this is a starting point for us. This is a way for us to get started in a structured way, because these, organizations exist. It's easy for us to reach out to them, but the goal is to talk to everybody, have an inclusive process for the whole community, and we'll get there. We'll definitely get there. One thing we might want to do in cases of these groups where it makes sense, we might actually ask them to schedule some time in their official meetings to discuss this, make recommendations to our board around, even if it's general guidelines, they all have concerns that we might not be aware of, things to know, things that we should be thinking about. So we might ask them to just put something on there, have an official discussion, and come back to us with those recommendations. I think that would probably be good. It's not going to make sense for every board, like zoning, they're not going to be able to do that, but economic development, they're going to have thoughts about how we should, be thinking about this site. Parks and Rec, certainly, some of these, it'll definitely make sense to have them kind of
Just to echo that real quick, and that was my thought as well, where the senior center, senior committee, Parks and Rec, they're gonna have recommendations on how that facility is best used to serve their population. You may get the opposite from public safety, from police and fire, as far as concerns, things to look out for as things are planned. So including all of them, we can get a wider picture of use, but also as we move through the process, what are some things that we need to look out for that we may not be thinking of that these boards, these organizations, these departments have to deal with.
Just kind of hearing all this, like that, map something out of my head, I think maybe we can broaden the scope of who we ask and how, right? I think, again, how my mind works, I work backwards, we're trying to accomplish, trying to capture information and data, right? What ideas, right? I think everybody wants to feel like they have their own whiteboard when they're expressing their ideas. If we make a questionnaire or survey or whatever, very detailed, it's gonna box them in already. So what if we just have 4 questions? Do you think the town should keep the land? Number 1, the town should sell land. So we can capture data on what people's opinions are. Number 3, what would you like to see at Halliwell? Number 4, what wouldn't you like to see at Halliwell? And that will be the framework of how, of who we ask everybody. We could ask those 4 questions to everybody in the boards. We could put all those 4 questions in Valley Breeze. Put a generic Halliwell idea in email. Then we could pose those 4 questions to every kid in school. We can get the entire youth population here as well. So I think it would be people who are on boards, exposed to information that maybe town members don't have. And we could actually pull from the community, people could push their ideas to us via email. But then we could also see what the younger demographic and generation thinks.
I would only, with the online surveys, the only thing that I would add is I would add a line to put your address. Because I want to make sure that we're not getting multiple responses from one person that's skewed one way or the other. It would be similar to when you come to town council and say, you know, my name is Jeff Porter, I'm at 6 Country Way, this is my thought. They don't have to put their name to it, but I think having their address to understand that they are in fact a town resident will probably, it's a simple question, you know, I think that would probably be my only addition to your 4 questions.
And that would allow us to take all that information and synthesize it, we could whiteboard it, okay, here's the number of people who think we should keep, sell, we have that data. And then we can give what people don't want, and we can segment that. Then the hardest part is gonna be what we then sub-segmenting what people do want. Right.
This might be a multi-round type thing too, because the first go at this, we're not gonna have all the information. You know, this Weston Sampson project, it's going on for a few months. After that, we're gonna have to still do some work to figure out what can really be done there realistically and budget and all that. So, you know, the first time that we're talking to everyone, it's more open-ended. You know, it's, if the world is your oyster, like, what would you do with this site? And then we can take that, and once we have a you know, idea of scope, what's possible, we can start to narrow in. And we might be reaching out to some people to follow up and say, all right, well, you know, some of what you said is impossible, but what about these other things? So I don't know, or now that we know what is possible, what do you think?
And you know, I've said this many times before. This is going to be a process that we are talking with a lot of people at very different times. Obviously, this is going to be our first go at talking with everybody, and hopefully we get a lot of. I agree with Frank. I think those four questions. I think that's a good basis on how we can start. I've been experimenting with some Google Forms, some Google information stuff, so we can set up a generic Halliwell email. Everybody can have access to that. I might want to, before we actually set that up, I might want to talk with our town solicitor, see if there's any legalities that we need to worry about, or if we can actually just have a @northsmithfieldri.org dedicated email address. We can certainly look at that too, but I think as far as the surveying goes, we could populate that right now and then send it off to the Valley Breeze. They can publish that. We can have it be put in the town newsletter. That can be sent out to everybody. There's quite a few Facebook groups for North Smithfield online.
Those are the four questions we can ask.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good place to start.
I agree with the brevity of here, but the one thought I had is on the third or the fourth question, on their use or what would you like? I don't know, you maybe consider subcategories, youth, elderly, open space, or do you want to leave it, like you said?
I think you should leave it open, to let people just come up with creative ideas, whatever that creative idea is. I think that Frank's point is excellent. It's a broad question. You can fill it like any way you want, and that's what we do.
I think what we need to do too is, we've been appointed that, generously have this white board, right? I don't think people want to be engaged with us already have preconceived ideas or already garnering them in or somebody in. I think if we can extend that whiteboard and then take all that in. Obviously, there's gonna be one night where we're sitting here like combing through papers or information, scoring data to see, the youth center is the number one.
I would make a motion that we proceed with we just said it, was that 4-question survey or questionnaire? 4-question questionnaire that we would distribute to all town committees that we mentioned, or and also the public through the Valley Breeze and online notification.
I think,
I just have one concern, and that's, we have the public forums through the Weston and Sampson contract, and I don't want it to be portrayed as we're repeating ourselves, right? So if we have a public forum and Weston and Sampson is there taking public questions, they might be posing the same questions, like, hey, what do you guys want? And it's, what do you mean, you just filled out this survey 2 months ago, 3 months ago, whatever. We don't want it to be perceived where we're duplicating efforts and they're looking at it and saying, well, wait a minute, I just, I agree with the survey, but I think we have to just be mindful that we don't want to be repeating this process in a public forum with the public, 3-4 months from now.
But we do the public direct, right? Just say, hey, we already answered this question. I think that's easy.
Right.
and I think at the public charrette, we'll be at a point where we have the assessment complete. We know what we can and can't do with some of the properties. There might be some limits that they come back to us and say, well, you can't use half the property because half the property is in wetlands. So you're limited to now having a building X square feet. But I think once, Weston Sampson has that public charrette, after we ask these 4 questions, we can start to ask more pointed questions, more direct. We can shape that public charrette based on this information and make it more direct and say, we've seen that a lot of the responses that we've received have youth services and an Olympic-sized swimming pool. How do we, and then start to initiate feedback based on that. If the whole crowd groans at the Olympic-sized swimming pool, then obviously, that there's that issue. And then we come to the other part where there are gonna be some people that feel more comfortable speaking their opinion at their computer, writing to us. That not everyone in town is gonna be extroverted and coming out to this public charrette and speaking up for them, for what they want to see. So I think we need to be able to provide the means and methods of people to comfortably give their feedback to us by whatever means they feel comfortable with.
I think the other note, though, to the benefit of Weston and Sampson, that's a very good point. If they look at it the right way, that's an asset to them, because now they have information coming in that will help them, and they can then push and pull, or at least be aware of the fact that, okay, you guys already got some feedback, we're gonna take that and then work within it, and yeah, it stands to reason that the majority of the people who take the time to respond to whatever we sent would probably also be at the public meeting. So they'll just reiterate, and there may be new people and the people who didn't want to come. So I think if they're aware of it prior, they can use it to their benefit.
So I think you're right. I think doing this ahead of time actually makes the public record more useful because it gives us a catalyst for discussion here, and that it helps Weston and Sampson focus the conversation a little bit instead of coming in with a blank slate and then, taking an hour and a half and trying to figure out where the heck we're going. It's a starting point. One practical thing about this is a survey area. I work for a research company. That first question, actually, I think it's a 3-question survey where the first question is, do you want to keep or sell the property? Instead of splitting that. It's a practical thing. There.
There are so many ways that you can ask one question. Okay. So if I was correct, we were in the process of hearing Mr. Najarian make a motion. Would you like to continue making the motion, or?
I don't know if I wrapped it all up sufficiently. I was trying to be sure I didn't want to make a motion.
Yeah, right.
Expand on selling, expand on.
Well, I guess the motion would be that the board, the committee approve the idea and develop a 4-question survey/questionnaire to be distributed to town committees and the general public. The specific details to be worked out by the committee at a later date.
Second.
All in favor?
Is that? Should we include the students?
Sure.
I'm thinking there's a month left of school, right? Maybe engage Mrs. St. Jean with this 4-question survey. Should you push it up to the principals and, it'd be probably fun for the kids to do.
But if we can get it done, it should be something that can be done for.
I mean, I can probably take 15 minutes later this evening, put it together, send a test out to all 8 of you, can try it out. I'll see if it works, and if it works, I can send it along to Donna, and she can include it in the town newsletter, and then I can share it with the groups that we've outlined already. If everyone's comfortable with me doing that.
Yeah, I think
I might look to my vice chair, who's more in the IT world. Make it look a little, make it look nice.
I think, Frank, that's a great idea. Let's get this to the students before the school year is out, because it gives us, access to get their opinions before everybody's kind of gone for the summer. So we're waiting until, everybody's back in September.
Mhm.
This is a separate discussion that we might want to talk about next time, but the results of this, is that something that should be made public? And, just thinking more generally about all the work that we do, all these discussions that we have, any forums that we hold, do we need a space to make all of these things available so that anybody can go look at them, whether it's on the town website, whether we have our own thing going on, just a space where, we're not the only ones looking at this. Anybody else can go and see, oh, interesting, 30% of the town thought it should be a pool or whatever. It might be good to just let everybody know this is not, some information hole where, you're giving information to us and it's lost. This is a dialogue with the community. You're giving us information, you're getting stuff back as well.
Can I give you some homework assignment then? I would say that that's great, but let's reach out to I know Carl's here for our Zoom meetings. I don't think he's full on IT. Let's find out who to speak to about having our own website tied to the town's webpage, and just be a repository for everything that we compile. Because honestly, I think at the end of this process, we're gonna, I know we're gonna have a report at the end of the process with Weston and Sampson. We're gonna have a very big appendices based on all the information that we're gonna get from everybody. And I think it would be a disservice to everybody if we don't include that.
Carl, can I ask you a question? Does this go on YouTube? Can I go on YouTube and see the Halliwell meeting?
Yes, it's actually it's on the same page as the town council
Okay,
meetings.
so in other words, to your point, if anybody's interested, they can do just like I did, go on YouTube and watch the last council meeting or watch the last Halliwell review. And we should let people know they can do that, so it's there.
Can I make a little bit more of a recommendation as well? If I don't know how many of you you guys actually attended the meeting we had at Halliwell when we discussed it. Maybe take a look at that. That was a very good forum. And there was a lot of feedback put in there too. So maybe a good video to watch as well. Yeah, it's on the town council. It's on the YouTube site.
More homework for everybody.
Can I suggest that we kind of put some structure and milestones around this? We're thinking like 90 days, maybe June, July, August is the timeframe, just listen all this input, and we'll say that's down before like Labor Day. And
Well, I think with this initial survey, let's see, because our next topic is Weston and Sampson's schedule. So I'm looking at their schedule, and I think really, I would say we probably want to have this initial survey completed within 30 days. Because Weston and Sampson is going to go and start working on their conceptual design work at the end of June, beginning of July. So if we can provide that information to them to start the framework around the conceptual design alternatives that we have, I think that will be very useful for them, because as you can see, they have the charrette with the public is actually going to be after the conceptual design alternatives. So I think we want to be able to give them as much information as possible to kind of start to frame things. Otherwise, they're just going to kind of look at the property and based on their assessments, make some recommendations of what we can do based on our direction. And I don't want it to be just our direction leading Weston and Sampson to these design alternatives. Okay. Well, with that, why don't we move on to the for discussion, consideration, and action review of the Weston and Sampson schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I need to step out, so I'll take this moment as my opportunity to exit.
Thank you, Scott. So as you folks know, I sent along the PDF at our last meeting. It was asked that we get a schedule and the resumes of all the folks that are going to be working on this project. So a lot of reading material. So thank you for reviewing all of that information. So I think really the biggest thing would be the schedule that I wanted to review with everybody. If we were starting to think that we wanted to have some of these items happen sooner or later. And we kind of go down the list. I think Carolyn's doing a great job putting this schedule together. So I guess I'll just leave it if there's any questions or concerns that you folks have. What we run down. Most everybody's good with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's totally fine. Just, I noticed a few inconsistencies that I wanted to call out. I don't think big deals though. So, your 2 electric, it says estimated task 1 week, and then they've got this nice color coded chart over on the right, but it's marked for 3 weeks. Same thing for 2 asbestos review. And then down towards the end, 5 feasibility analysis. They've got it marked for 4 weeks, but it's only showing 2 on their schedule. I'm going to assume that the numeric value is the correct one.
So I think in this instance, for say example, the electrical assessment, and they have it as 1 week, it might just be a scheduling thing. So it could be the week of the 7th, the week of the 14th, or the week of the 21st, but I can certainly ask that clarification.
These could be kind of work weeks too, whereas 4 weeks condensed into 2 is yeah, 2 working hours.
And then I was also gonna ask the committee what they thought about having the public charrette the week of, the last 2, potentially having it the last 2 weeks of July. So if there was, if some folks had some thoughts of when we might want to make sure we have that or get that date solidified so we can start to, 1, schedule the meeting and publicize it, and 2, but really just make sure that we post. It's what we want to get out there.
So if we're looking for the charrette on like July 19th or that week, then we could talk about this survey kind of fielding through June, right? And then if we put a soft close on it into June, we'd be able to kind of look at it at our first meeting in July and prepare our thoughts for sharing with Weston Sampson later in the month.
The other thing is, we do have 4 meetings with this committee with Weston and Sampson. It looks like they're going to be wrapped up really by the end of August. So I would say that, 1 meeting would be to provide their findings in their report at the end of August. And then really we have 3 more meetings to kind of distribute throughout. So if folks wanted to invite Carolyn and her team to attend any of our meetings, we can certainly ask her to add those to the schedule as well.
Would it make sense to have them meet with us prior to the public event?
Yep.
So we understand, be comfortable with them, what their presentation.
I think that will, yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I think we would want to meet with them maybe even twice before, just so that they can come explain to us what their thoughts are. We can have our dialogue. They can come back to us with their final plan, have our public charrette, and then we can have a, so I would say maybe we'll have a meeting with them in June, the week before the public charrette in July, final meeting in August. So really we're kind of up to 4th one, whenever we felt that they should be coming forward.
Just to put dates on that, we'll be looking at like June 17th, be our second meeting, July 15th, and then the week after that, we're talking about doing the public charrette.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say if we wanted to start publicizing, that the day that we're gonna, I would obviously recommend that we have it on a Saturday and not a Thursday night. Make this a little bit more accessible for everybody. Have it down on site, down at Halliwell, have an outside meeting. And then we could look at, based on this, the 24th, which is a Saturday. Does that work for everybody? You pencil that in? Start to say, don't plan your vacation this weekend because we want to hear from you. I know summers are tough. We couldn't have picked a better time, but hey, it is what it is.
So I'm totally thinking about this.
Okay.
So I kind of feel like when the public charrette is happening informally through the survey process. So why should we have it it's somewhere in the middle of this sequence of activities versus the end? I'm thinking when formally gathering information to the public, it behooves us to make that data capture info or data capture period longer. We can share that info with Weston, Samson, and getting it, right? We get in charge of the information. How many more different ideas could we get in July, August, right?
So I know from an architectural standpoint for the public charrette, we talk about programming, what's going to go on inside these buildings. And then we talk about what it's going to look like. Are we going to have masonry? Are we going to have glass and steel? What kind of architecture are we thinking about? So there's kind of two, and it's very hard to describe what things look like in a survey. When we start asking, what do you expect this to start to look like?
How can we do that?
Well,
That's like picking
but that's also going to be part of what Weston and Sampson does when they do their feasibility analysis. They need to know what materials this community wants to see their community center made out of, so they can start to put a number to it. Because a masonry building is going to be very different than a glass and steel building, or a wood frame building. Don't do a wood frame building, because we've already seen what happens. Is it going to be, are we going to have wood floors? Are we going to have rubber floors? Are we going to have carpet? Just this to start to frame what this building becomes will then inform what that feasibility analysis is, and it will give us a cost of an order of magnitude cost. So I think that's part of what the public charrette is also going to entail. It could very well be that, I'm explaining what I would do, but it might be worth having Carolyn be at the next meeting so that she can explain all these things and how her process, how we can dovetail into her process, as opposed to starting to, I'm glad we're taking charge, but I think we have a consultant for a reason to help guide us and kind of work hand in hand.
No, I totally agree. We can give ourselves enough time to capture as much as possible. It's not be redundant, to Steve's point earlier. When, I guess, we're on track with this, even if we can, can we help when we're collecting the information, right? Can we help Weston and Sampson along the way when we're collecting almost in real time, right? To make that public charrette more impactful and more structured, versus starting over from this. But then also too, we're talking about the details, right, with that public charrette. So you get 4 people show up, right? And they, 4 loudest people, and now impact them in feasibility study based upon their ideas.
So is it possible, as part of setting up the the survey, is it possible to establish a date of the public charrette, agree upon that, and include that date as well on the survey? So that people that fill it out know that there's gonna be a public forum held by the engineering firm, Weston and Sampson, on such and such date. But there's also gonna be a survey, you know, if they can't attend or would like to, you know, voice their opinions ahead of that, you know, here's a survey for you to fill out. And obviously, if we send it to the kids are gonna fill out the survey, you know, they're not gonna say, oh, wait until the forum. Probably, they're probably gonna fill out the survey, you know, and I think a lot of people do, especially if we, you know, we can market the forum and the survey through, you know, each week through the town email newsletter, we can do it through the Valley Breeze, we can do it in the Sergeant Call. You know, a lot of NRI now, we can even do it, during, you know, get in touch with Parks and Rec and maybe have them make an announcement during a concert on the Commons. Also doing it during the fireworks, which I think is taking place second week in July, or the week after July 4th. So I mean, I think there's a lot of ways that we can really drive it home, both the survey and the public charrette.
And again, I think this will be our initial public charrette. We're probably going to have more of these. Just looking further down the future, I know we're gonna have more of these. Whether it be with Weston and Sampson at a future date, whether it just be all of us running it, whether we have another consultant coming in and assisting us in any way to run these public charrettes. I'm also thinking that we're going to be having some focus groups. We'll probably have smaller group meetings, individual conversations, as we were talking last week, having a table at Pumpkin Fest. You know, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for us to talk with people to build that consensus. And this is just one of the means that we can do it by.
I think we can think about this as a preliminary interest survey. It's really high level, you know, it's greenfield, think of whatever you want. And it's going to be redundant. You know, over time, we're going to have these conversations over and over with people. And as we do, we're going to drill into the detail. We're going to scope down or start with, you know, everything. And this was already done informally a couple of years ago. And we're going to start to put a little bit of structure around it. And over time, these conversations are going to get more detailed. They're going to get more granular. The scope of possibilities is going to decrease. And I think that redundancy is a good thing. We can start at that high level ourselves with this public charrette. We'll start to drill into those details with Weston and Sampson. I think whatever we have at that point is going to help them be a little bit more focused, and we'll just get more focused as we go along until, you know, where we have a good sense of what are the 3 or 4 realistic possibilities for the site.
Okay. So right now, as far as Weston and Sampson's schedule goes, looking at June 17th, July 15th, for them to be here. July 24th, say a Saturday morning, will be the public charrette. And then their final report at August 19th. It may be worthwhile having them come back in August, at the beginning of August, to say, you know, okay, we almost did do a recap of the public charrette. This is between the surveys and the public charrette, this is what the trends that we're finding. And I don't want to leave out time for us to really focus on some of these concepts. This is just me personally. I'd like to make sure that we have more than just one presentation of the conceptual design alternatives. So maybe that, you know, gets spread out a little bit over, you know, July and August. But my thought is that maybe we have them come back on August 5th to do a recap and
go from there.
Those dates sound appropriate for everybody? Okay. So then, in the survey that we'll put out, we will start to advertise at the public shred week of July 24th. Do we have any other questions about the Weston and Sampson schedule and resumes?
Should we hold off on publishing that page? God forbid something happens with it.
Take the temperature of everybody else, as everybody else.
So I just don't want to box ourselves into something that we may not have control. Why don't we wait to talk to?
Okay.
Maybe just even work phone call.
Yeah.
Just, is that way to be listening?
Okay. No, I'll follow up with her.
So Jeff, are we back having her attend the next meeting?
I think it might be worthwhile. So come prepared with questions.
How much information would they should have some, right? They're starting.
They're starting, as far as I know, she was relayed to me an email that they were hoping, the surveyors were hoping to get out this week. They were chomping at the bit. So I did not hear definitively if they've been out there, but over the next 2 weeks, they should be, full steam ahead.
I guess the only qualifier is, since we only got 4 of these, we want to make sure that even if you have the delay until the 15th, or the following meeting, make sure that when she does come, if there was any delays with their in-house workings, that
Yep.
we don't have her come here and say, well, gee, I was supposed to have that. But it
Yeah,
wasn't."
that could be one of the things that I asked for, is just an updated schedule for every 2 weeks when we meet, so then I can report back to you guys. That is not an uncommon thing that I do every day. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So we only have 2 more items on the agenda. Our next meeting will be on June 3rd. And then Paul, you always join us, right? The best time.
Yeah, including upstairs.
Jeff, before you adjourn, just want to bring the board's attention. The meeting, the date of the meeting at the Halliwell last year was March 7th, 2020. So if you want to go back and look at the video of the public comment back then.
The day before the world went to shit.
Right, exactly.
Excuse my language.
I kept this till the end of the meeting. A lot of you know Tony Deller from town, and I was doing PT with him today, and we were chatting about the Halliwell. And Tony came up with an interesting thought. He said, why don't you do this? How many acres do we got there? 17? 30. Okay. He said it's a large piece of property. Think about selling the property with the caveat that whoever buys it puts up the structure that we want as a community center. So that's, not my idea, but Tony's a pretty sharp guy. And I said, that's something to consider. So you'd have somebody put up Silver Pines type thing, obviously it'd be that kind of thing, apartments or condos. And then as part of the deal, which, they pay less money for the property, they build us exactly what we want. Just a thought, so I'll throw it up there. Okay.
I would recommend you put that in the survey that you'll be getting.
I will.
Now, to go back, should the town administrator's office be included in our list of outreach?
You and I are on text.
It's a Saturday, Sunday morning call.
Yeah. All right, then, if we have nothing else.
Oh, one other thing, maybe we could have an agenda item for the next meeting, but this issue of membership, yeah, I don't think it's gone away. So I think at least we should give the board an opportunity to speak freely under an agenda item and come to whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that, earlier, we were talking about sending out this survey to the school.
Who's
We
on
had
the
to
committee, who's not on the
bring
committee,
those.
adding people.
a lot of attention back to our board here. We sent a survey to the school, so bring all that expect to the board. That's.
Yeah, I would be shocked if that observation wasn't made by countless people.
Right.
That we're a bit lacking. And again, I don't want to belabor it. If it's on the agenda, then we can speak freely and then the committee can come up to whatever conclusion it comes up.
I don't disagree, but I don't think we have the jurisdiction or purview to alter.
Oh, we're
So-
just making.
making a recommendation, we do that.
We're just making a recommendation, or we make no
This is
recommendation at
do
all.
our due diligence, like making a recommendation, or it comes back, and that's what fits.
It's not in our purview, but we can make an observation and say, or we make no at all, whatever the committee decides. We say, we would suggest this to the powers that be, or we have nothing to say. But we should at least discuss.
All right. So with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We are done at 8:02. Thank you, everybody.